Hello, everyone. So, have you ever been scrolling online and seen a headline that just made you furious? Or maybe a video that seemed a little too perfect? In this explainer for your Anglais Monde Contemporain course, we're going to tackle a really vital skill: how to navigate our crazy, complex media world and become more critical, more enlightened citizens. First, we'll look at the problem. Then we'll get into a practical toolkit you can use. And finally, we'll talk about the mindset that makes it all clear.
Okay, let's just jump right in with a question I know you deal with every single day. You're scrolling through your feed, you're looking up stuff for a school project, and you are just hit with this tidal wave of information. So how on earth do you tell what's real and what's not? To even start to answer that, we first have to get a handle on the environment we're all swimming in. And, a lot of researchers have started calling it a polluted environment. Polluted information actually comes from a government report, and it's a really useful way to think about the whole mess. Misinformation, for example. That's when someone shares a fake health tip just because they honestly think it's true. Disinformation, on the other hand, is way more sinister. Think of a fake ad created to trick you into voting a certain way. And then there's malinformation. That's when the information is actually true, but it's shared specifically to hurt someone, like leaking private messages. And believe me, the stakes here are incredibly high. This is not just about silly internet arguments. As the researcher Ruha Benjamin points out, biased algorithms can create what she calls a digital poorhouse. What does that mean? It means that the systems we use for everything, from job applications to bank loans, can be built in ways that automatically discriminate against people, trapping them in a cycle of inequality. It's a direct threat to the idea of equal opportunity. So what does all this have to do with our class? Well, in AMC, our whole goal is to understand the English-speaking world, and you just can't do that without understanding its media. This skill is a huge part of what we study, and yep, it's something you'll be assessed on.
And as you can see, this slots perfectly into our current theme, representations du monde. We're zooming in on Axis 3, how these representations get around and how the media influences us. In other words, we're not just passively consuming stuff, we're actively analyzing how our reality is being constructed by the media and what our part is in that whole process.
So what is the number one skill we need? It's critical thinking. Now, it's really important to remember that being critical doesn't mean being negative. The word actually comes from the Greek kritikos, which means being able to judge or discern. It's all about making solid judgments based on solid information.
And that's why this is so fundamental. The Council of Europe makes it clear that media literacy isn't just some academic thing. It's absolutely essential for a healthy democracy. When we can all evaluate information well, it strengthens everything: tolerance, responsibility, and that feeling of being in it together for the common good.
Okay, so that's the why. But what about the how? How do you actually do this when you're just scrolling super fast online? Well, luckily for us, there's a simple, really practical toolkit we can use. It's called the SIFT method. SIFT was designed by information experts specifically for this fast-paced online world. It's not about spending hours researching. It's about 4 simple moves you can make to sift fact from fiction without falling down an internet rabbit hole. So let's look at the 4 moves: stop, investigate, find, and trace. I want you to think of this like a quick mental checklist you can run through in less than a minute. Let's break each one down so you can start using this like today. The first move is so simple, but it might just be the most important. Before you get angry, before you get excited, before you hit that share button, just stop. Take a breath and ask yourself one question. Do I actually know this website? Is this source trustworthy? That little pause is your best defense against reacting to something that was designed to make you emotional. Okay, second move, investigate. Now, this does not mean you have to spend hours doing deep research. Seriously, just take 30 seconds. Open a new tab, search the name of the website or the author, and see what other, more reliable sources are saying about them. The third move is to find better coverage. The idea here is to see if anyone else, especially reliable sources, is reporting the same story. If you see some shocking claim on a totally random blog, but big news organizations like the BBC or Reuters aren't touching it, that's a massive red flag. And finally, trace those claims, quotes, and images back to where they originally came from. So much of this polluted information works by taking a real quote or a real video clip and twisting its meaning by taking it out of context. You always have to ask, where did this come from? Am I seeing the whole story here? Because context is everything. But here's the thing. You can have the best toolkit in the world, but it's not going to do you much good if you're not in the right frame of mind to use it. And that brings us to mindset, and specifically this idea of intellectual humility.
So what is intellectual humility? Well, it's basically recognizing that you might be wrong. It's about separating your ego from your intellect. Being smart isn't about knowing everything. It's about being willing to learn and change your mind when you see better evidence. And that is so hard to do online, where algorithms are literally designed to trap us in echo chambers. The story of Malcolm X is just such a powerful example of this in action. For most of his life, he was a really influential activist who believed in racial separatism. But then he went on a pilgrimage to Mecca, and he saw a kind of racial harmony that completely contradicted his deepest beliefs. And instead of just ignoring it, he had the humility to rearrange his thinking and completely change his worldview. All right, let's bring this all together. When we combine this practical SIFT toolkit with a mindset of intellectual humility, we can start moving towards our ultimate goal, becoming informed, active, and truly enlightened citizens. Ultimately, we face a choice in how we act online. We can be what some call homo economicus, basically acting only out of self-interest, sharing things just because they confirm what we already think. Or we can try to be homo collaborans, someone who understands that we're all part of a community and that we have a collective responsibility to keep our shared information space healthy. And that right there is our key takeaway. The answer to that first big question, how do we know what's true, is that we have to combine a practical tool, SIFT, with an open mindset, intellectual humility. This combination isn't just going to make you a better citizen, it's going to give you the exact analytical skills you need to nail your AMC essays, especially when you have to write a Cinci and evaluate your documents. So I'll end by turning the question back over to you. You have the tools now, you understand the mindset, so what's the first thing you're going to do, maybe the next time you're scrolling, to become a more critical, a more engaged, and a more enlightened citizen?